Hi, I'm Beth from Sew Country, and today's tutorial is for the Scotia Satchel from Toriska Patterns. Now this designer is one of my favorite designers. Her patterns are all so well written, and she does her own videos and they are perfect. They describe everything in great detail. Really, I have almost all of her patterns, and if you don't have any, I definitely suggest you check out at least one, even if this one isn't your style. You will be able to sew her patterns easily because she gives you every detail to help you through without it being an extremely long or confusing pattern. So she is one of my favorite designers by far. When I saw this pattern, I knew immediately that I was going to fall in love with it because I feel like it's a unique pattern. And then once I got the pattern and got into it, I love the way she taught, she explains how to do the binding. I'm a huge fan of binding and I loved her techniques, so this was perfect for me. So let's go through the features of this satchel and then we will talk about the pieces we need to create it. First thing is that this pattern comes with 3 different sizes. This is the large, so this is the largest size we have. We will have a magnetic snap in our front. We will have a zipper on the back. You can see the D-rings are here. This can be worn either as a saddlebag around your waist, a crossbody, a sling. So the way the D-rings are attached gives you several options or ways to wear this satchel. The pattern comes with a slip pocket inside. So the slip pocket's right here. And also another zipper pocket inside. I'm not going to do this one in the tutorial, but it's created the same way as the one on the back. We also have this really cool gusset. So you can look and see how this bag can be folded flat when you're not using it, but then when you open it, you definitely have plenty of room. It's almost like expandable. So you could fit, I would say probably 4 water bottles in this large if you were going on a hike or a walk, snacks, whatever you need. So I love the adjustability of it, and I feel like it's a very practical pattern. So let's go ahead and talk about the pieces we'll need. First thing I want to talk about is the strap. She gives you the measurements for the strap, and I'm choosing to use vinyl. I went ahead and prepped my strap by drawing a line right down the middle. For this method, she tells you that you are going to use webbing on the back, and this will be the front. Of course, you can make a regular strap if you wanted to, but I'm going to show you how to do this one. So this is the 2 pieces you need for the strap, webbing and your material or vinyl. If you are using a fabric, then you'll want to interface it with like an SF101. The next thing we'll need is the D-rings. So I'm going to have 2 D-rings. And then I'm going to have my D-ring connectors. I have 2 D-ring connectors. I cut these out of the exterior fabric, but you could use webbing, you could use a contrast fabric, whatever you want. I went ahead and prepped these pieces by attaching SF101 equivalent and then drawing a line down the middle. The D-rings will go in the back. The next thing I'm going to have is my zipper. I am only using 1 zipper in this one, and so I have my zipper and the pull attached. If you're making both a back pocket on the exterior and an interior pocket, you will need 2. I'm going to have 2 swivel hooks for my strap to attach to my D-rings. I'm going to have 1 magnetic snap. Now I'm just using the simple prong magnetic snaps. You could definitely use the riveted snaps if you wanted, but I'm going to have 1 here on the lining flap and then 1 on my exterior front. Binding. We are going to cut this binding on the bias if you can, because we will be using this around the curves. When we cut the binding on the bias, that gives us that little bit of stretch so we can go around the curves easier. Now, if you're unable to cut it on the bias or you just don't want to, you can cut it on the grain. It's just you might get a little more puckering around your curves when you attach the binding. The measurements, of course, for the binding are given in the pattern. Then we have a gusset. We have both an exterior and a lining gusset, so you're going to cut 2 gussets. The gussets are this piece right here. She gives you 2 ways to do the gusset. I'm cutting my gusset on the bias, but there's also an alternative method for the gusset if you don't want to cut yours on the bias or if you want to use a vinyl here. So we're doing the traditional method, but that is an option if you want to look at the pattern. She goes through all the steps for that one as well. So 2 pieces for your gusset. Then we are going to have 2 lining pieces for our slip pocket. So both of mine are the same color. And then we're going to have it's going to be like the trim, the binding for the slip pocket. And this one does not need to be on the bias, so you can just cut a piece up for this. I'm using a contrast just so it gives it a little bit of pop of color there. But that slip pocket will be seen as soon as you open your bag. Then we have the lining piece for our zipper pocket. Again, if you're making 2 zipper pockets, cut out 2 of these. Then we have our piece C, our flap lining. You can see mine smaller because we are making the small in this video and this one is the large size. So we will have the flap lining. On this flap lining, we're attaching the entire piece with Decaville Heavy. I know this is something that alarms people. It alarmed me too. I was like, what? I've never sewn through Decaville Heavy. I always keep it out of the seam allowances. No, it is not kept out of the seam allowance. Your entire piece is interfaced with Decaville Heavy. I sewed this on my domestic. I had no problems. I was really shocked by it, but I love that technique. Really thankful she taught it to me. But go ahead and take your lining piece, fuse it with the Decaville Heavy, make your marks on your top and your bottom, and also go ahead and transfer the mark for your magnet onto this piece. So the next piece we'll look at is our piece B, our flap exterior. We only need one of those. I'm using cotton, so I went ahead and interfaced it with an SF101 equivalent. And the last piece we're going to look at is the piece A. That is going to be this section right here. So the first thing we're going to have is our front exterior. We are also going to interface this with Decaville Heavy, except she gives us a measurement, and I had mine a little uneven, but she gives us a measurement to keep that Decaville out of this portion. So go ahead and interface the Decaville Heavy onto your piece A, but you will have a portion at the top that is not interfaced. Go ahead and transfer your magnetic snap from the pattern piece because we will attach it here. Also, that piece A, we will have a lining piece that will go right here in the front. And then we're also going to have the piece A that goes on the back. You can see the seam right here. This is all the pieces and hardware that we will need to complete this pattern. So now that we have everything cut, interfaced, we'll do a couple prepping. We'll go ahead and install our magnet and start getting everything ready to construct this bag. I think you're going to be really surprised at how quickly this satchel comes together. So let's go ahead and get started with some basic prepping of the pattern pieces to make sure we can have everything ready for when we need to sew it. First thing I want to do is I want to use the pattern piece, like I said, to make your magnetic placements for the 2 pieces with the Decaville Heavy. That's going to be your piece A front exterior, your piece C flap lining. Once I have those magnetic snap placements, I'm going to go ahead and install my snaps. I like to use the magnetic part of the snap on the part of the bag that's going to be the most stationary. For this purse or for this satchel, it's going to be your piece A. So this is a part I'm going to attach that is magnetic, which would end up being the female portion, or as the pattern calls it, the thicker portion. So that's going to be on my piece A. For the piece C, I'm going to go ahead and install the male portion on that. I'm also going to pull out my D-ring connector. We have 2 of these. I drew the line down the middle, and then I'm just going to fold the raw edge over to that line and do that for both sides, and then it'll look like this. I'm not folding it again, so these raw edges will stay on the inside. So after we fold each raw edge to the middle, then I will top stitch down each long edge or along side, 1/8 of an inch away from the folded edge. Once I do that, we will then just slip the D-ring on. So let's go ahead and do these steps to get things ready. So now I have my magnetic snaps attached. I have my D-rings attached. I did go ahead and baste down the bottom just to hold them in place a little securely. I'm going to set these 2 D-rings and the connectors aside. I don't need them right now. And I'm going to keep this piece A with the female portion magnetic snap out and set the flap lining aside. I'm going to go ahead and pull out the lining piece A. And you can see it's just got the medium weight interfacing on it. And if you are going to add a zipper pocket to this piece, go ahead and do that now. I am not adding the zipper pocket, but whenever I do the back pocket piece, it's the same way. So if you get confused or don't understand the directions, you can watch my video on that part in just a little bit, and that'll help walk you through it. So decide on that now and get that installed. But if you're not like me, what you'll do is we will just place this right sides together. They should match up perfectly. If they're different sizes, go check your pattern piece to make sure you have everything correct. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to sew across this straight edge here at the top with the seam allowance given in the pattern. After you've sewn that together, what we're going to do now is we're going to open that up, and you can take this over to the iron if you want. Press that seam open, and we're going to flip these so they are wrong sides together. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch that edge I just sewed 1/8 of an inch away, and then I'll go ahead and baste around the rest of this piece and have it securely attached. I have this piece top stitched and basted together. So now that we have the front part of the bag sewn, we're going to go ahead and move into the back portion. The back pocket is made the exact same way as the interior pocket. So since I didn't make the interior pocket, you can watch this to get the exact instructions and just follow these steps. The pattern does have all the measurements broken down as to how far down you put your lining piece and how far in and how wide you draw your box. What you'll do is you'll put your lining, your zipper pocket lining, right sides together with your back exterior. I drew the box on there, and then I'm going to sew directly on this line to sew the zipper box in place. Lots of times I will skip the sides of the box. I feel like I get a neater turn on the box, but for this one I'm going to follow the pattern exactly and sew on all 4 lines. Now that I have that box sewn on, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to fold this piece in half to get the cut started. I'm going to cut through all the layers, just a snip there in the middle. Then I'll open it up to make sure I cut evenly. I'm going to cut down the center of that box until I get close to the edge, maybe 1/2 of an inch away or something. I'm not for sure exactly. And then I'm going to cut to the corner. I'm going to make sure I get as close as I can to the corner, but not cutting my stitches. I'll repeat that process for the other side. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this lining through this back exterior. I will have to take this over to the ironing board and get a good press on this so it will stay flat and look nice. But in a sense, you'll take your time, pulling everything out, pressing everything flat to get a really nice, clean zipper box. Lots of times what I'll do is I'll even press this seam open first and then press the lining up. So let me go take this to the ironing board and I will be back and we will install the zipper. So now I got the zipper pocket opening pressed flat in the back exterior portion of my bag. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my zipper. I like to have my zipper pull pointing to the left, so that's the way we're going to do it. If you want to add double-sided tape to the long edges of your zipper, that is a technique a lot of people use. I personally don't use it. I feel like it's harder for me to work with. So what I do is I take my back and my zipper directly over to my machine. And then while I'm here at the machine, I center the zipper tape in that opening. I make sure my teeth are evenly in the middle of that box. Then what I do is I hold it down and start sewing it. I don't go fast, I go slow. But for me, this is an easier way because I can move things as they shift and I don't have to worry about the tape sticking and things of that nature. So I don't feel like it's a really hard way to do it this way, and I feel like it's kind of quicker, but a lot of people swear the double-sided tape method's easier, so your preference. But what you'll see me doing is you'll see me kind of holding it down and occasionally moving the zipper tape to make sure it stays nice, even, and flat. So I just sewed 1/8 of an inch away around the perimeter of that box, and that secures the zipper tape to the back exterior. Now I'm going to flip it over and I'm just going to fold that lining up right sides together. So I'm going to put just a clip or two at top just to kind of help it stay straight while I'm sewing it. I'm going to flip it over and sew from this side. So I will start down here at that folded edge and I will sew the zipper pocket closed with the seam allowance giving in the pattern. So now that we have the zipper pocket attached and closed, what we'll do now is we'll pull out the 2 D-rings with the connectors we sewed already and our piece B, the flap exterior. The pattern tells us how far in we place these D-ring connectors, and so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I also want to leave a little bit of the D-ring connector hanging over for a little bit more security in this. The pattern does also give you that measure about how much you want to hang over and also has pictures to show you. So now what I want to do is I'm going to baste my 2 D-rings in place. And by baste, I mean I'm just going to sew 1/8 of an inch away from the raw edge of the exterior. Now that I have the D-rings basted on, I'm going to take my piece B flap exterior and place it right sides together with that back exterior. I want to put a few clips there just to keep that top edge flush. And now we're going to sew across this top edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So now that I got these 2 pieces sewn together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip up the piece B, the flap exterior, and I'm going to push that seam allowance down. That's going to cause those D-rings to go up, and that's the way we want them. Now what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to top stitch all along here to secure that seam allowance down and keep everything connected. Then I will go and add 2 rivets right underneath my D-rings here for extra security. You do not have to add those rivets. You can if you want to. You could also just do an extra row of top stitching, however you wanted to do it, or you could just do the 1 row and be okay with that. I'm going to top stitch just 1/8 of an inch away from this connecting edge right here. So it'll be all along that side. So now that I top stitched and had the rivets in place, I'm going to take out my lining, the piece C flap lining, the one with the magnetic snap, and I'm going to lay these two pieces wrong sides together. You can use the center marks on your pattern piece to make sure you line these up correctly, but they should fit perfectly. I'm going to add just a clip at the top and a clip at the bottom so that they kind of stay in place while I'm sewing them. And I also want to make sure that that pocket's laying nice and smooth. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to baste all the way around these two pieces, securing them, making them one piece. Now we're going to take the two gusset pieces. You should have one exterior and one lining gusset piece. Now again, I'm doing the traditional method. If you have the alternative method, you can follow the instructions for that one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay these right sides together and I'm going to match the short ends. I'm going to sew both of the short ends according to the seam allowance given the pattern. So I'll just put one clip here, come down to the other end, put a clip there, and then I'm just going to sew both of these short ends together. Now that I have those two short ends sewn together, I'm going to turn this right side out. And then I'm going to baste along the raw edges, the long raw edges. So we will make this one complete unit, and so we're going to baste all the way down each raw edge. I'm just going to put a few clips in place. I'm also going to lengthen my stitch length. Because this is cut on the bias, I don't want to lose any of that stretch with my stitches. So I'm going to turn my stitch length up to around a 5, just so I can, or 4.5, just so I can make sure that I do get this connected, but I'm not losing any of that stretch on it. So now I'm taking that gusset piece that I just sewed together and I'm going to take my bag front. Now your bag front has the magnetic snap attached to the exterior, and then the lining is just basted wrong sides together with it. So what I do is we want to have the exterior of the gusset attached to the exterior of the bag. So you're going to clip that all in place. You're going to have just a slight bit of overhang if possible. Mine's not wanting to stay up on that side so much, but probably when I sew it, that will pull up, the stretch will pull up a little bit more. But just a little bit of an overhang on the tops. I go ahead and clip it all the way around. The best way to do this is to find your centers, match them up first, and put a clip here. Then come and pull up your sides and put clips here. And then clip all the way, the rest of the way around, easing it into there. After we get it clipped together, what we're going to do is we're going to sew with the seam allowance given the pattern all the way around this curve. It shouldn't be too hard because you have some stretch and some give in this, and you should be able to go around the curves. If you have trouble, pull out a stiletto to kind of help hold in place with the curve so you don't lose too much of the area. You really want the raw edges matching on the curves. Now that we have this gusset attached to the exterior, I'm simply going to flip it all the way around and clip it in place. You're going to pull it tight and just put your clips all the way around. Now that I got it clipped in place, I'm going to look, and if I see any like bunching here, I'm going to pull this part too, just so I make sure it's nice and tight. I don't want any bubbles or bunching or anything like that. And what you can do is you can decide if you want to sew from this side or from this side. It'll be easier if you sew from this side because you can make sure you don't go over any bumps or anything. But I feel pretty comfortable, so I'm going to sew from this side. But definitely know that sewing from this side, you could have your eye on any creases that may develop. So now I have the gusset attached to the exterior front and the lining of the bag. So I'm going to set this aside for just a minute. So now we're going to sew the slip pocket. We have 2 slip pocket pieces. Now both of mine are the same, but we'll consider this one the exterior and this one the lining. And so what I did is I took the binding piece and I just flipped it down, lining up those top edges, and I'm just going to sew across this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Now that I have that sewn, I'm going to flip up this binding piece and flip it over, tuck in that raw edge, or fold it in, you can say. And then I'm just going to use a clip or 2 to hold that in place. And it should cover up your previous row of stitches almost perfectly. Flatten that down a little bit. And now I'm just going to sew across. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do 2 rows of stitches. And this is going to be my exterior. So I'm sewing from my exterior side. I'm going to do 1 row of stitches 1/8 of an inch away. And then I'm going to come down and do another row of stitches 1/8 of an inch away from this folded edge. Now that I have those 2 rows of stitching done, I'm just going to baste around that curve all the way around 1/8 of an inch away too, to make this all one piece. I'm going to pull out my, it's now the back and the flat piece, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this slip pocket that we sewed and I'm going to clip it in place, and it's going to fit perfectly, but you can match the centers and then clip around the sides. But I'm going to clip this and then baste this in place, and then we will attach the front to this as well. If you're uncomfortable with the hardware, you could always sew it from this side, but I feel like it'll be okay as long as I'm careful and just go slow. So now our next step is to attach this gusset to the rest of the bag, the back of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this lining side up, and I'm going to go ahead and put this lining side down. We want to match up our centers at the bottom, and then for these top sides, what's going to happen is we want to avoid this slip pocket bulky seam. We want to avoid this seam, and then that gusset will be just a little bit above it. The pattern gives you more of an exact measurement, so you can find that in there, but just know we want to avoid those bulky areas so we don't have any extra bulk than we need to. So let's go ahead and get this clipped into place. So now I have clipped my bag front to the bag back. Now you can see I just aligned the raw edges. It is up at the top past the bulky areas like I said, and also the centers are marked. And then we will, so we're just going to sew around this area using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And you can see this easily slides out of the way, so you can have plenty of room to get up in there. Okay, now we got that attached. So now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the binding out. Now this binding was, the pattern gives you a specific width and length to cut this out. And then we're just going to make sure it's not twisted. We're going to put those right sides together, and let me lay that down so you can see that a better. And then we're just going to sew at that 90-degree angle. So when we open it up, it'll just be a smooth seam and not a bulky seam. And so then this will be a loop that we can use to fit around the bag. So now that you have the binding sewn together, I'm just going to clip off that excess, leave about a quarter of an inch seam allowance right along there. So what I do is I just take the binding, I'm going to match up the raw edges, and I'm just going to clip all around the perimeter of this bag, and then we will come back and sew it. So now I have the binding clipped all the way around. You can see here is the front, so it's clipped to the back. And so now what I'm going to do is sew this on with the seam allowance given the pattern. You can sew it either way you want. You can sew it from this side, or you can sew it from this side. Where this is so flexible, it's not too big of an issue. You're going to do just fine with this, whichever way. So I'm going to do my traditional and sew it this way, but you can easily sew it from the other way. Okay, once you have your binding attached, you're going to do it like you would any other binding. You're going to flip it all over to the other side, and then you will tuck in that raw edge and pull it down so it just covers those previous stitches. We are going to put clips in place. We're going to do this all around the bag, and then we will sew it again one last time, and then the bag part will be done, and we'll just have our strap left to finish. So now I have the binding clipped all the way around the back of the bag, and so you get to choose once again which way you want to sew it. You can sew it from this side or from this side. This side, may be easier, but I'm going to sew it from this side so I can make sure my exterior looks really nice, and I'll just keep this front moved out of the way whenever I need to. Okay, I finished sewing the binding. Everything's attached. All I have to do is trim up some loose threads, and then this bag is completely done except for the strap. So let's go ahead and set this aside. I'm going to clip it closed, and I'm going to work on my strap. So when creating our strap, we're going to do follow the pattern directions. So I cut my vinyl according to the measurements, and I drew a line down the middle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fold both raw edges to that center line. In the pattern, they do talk about using double-sided tape. As you know, I don't use double-sided tape unless I really have to. With this situation, I'm going to use the Beacon 3-in-1 glue. I can understand that this is probably a little more challenging than the double-sided tape, so feel free to run a row of double-sided tape down the middle and then just fold it that way. But I'm going to glue mine down. So I glued the raw edges to the middle, and I gave it time to dry so everything's clipped together so I can take my clips off. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the webbing and I'm going to place it, and the pattern tells you how far down, but I'm going to place it down a little bit below the raw edge, and I'm going to clip all of these sides in place. So I'll clip it all the way down to the other edge. So let's go ahead and get this clipped in place. So now I have clipped together both the vinyl and the webbing, and what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to sew down both sides about 1/8 of an inch away. I'm going to sew from my vinyl side because this is going to be considered my prettier side, my exterior side. So I'm going to sew this, but I'm going to make sure that while I'm sewing, I'm keeping the webbing in place because it might want to slide around. I'm not using double-sided tape. I just have it clipped in place. And so I'm going to sew down both long edges. Now that we have the strap sewn together with our webbing, we're going to take our swivel hooks, you have 2 of these, and I'm simply going to fold it on there, and where that webbing ends, I'm just going to fold it down. It does not bother me to leave this edge raw, and this vinyl's a little thick, and so I don't want to have it double folded. So I'm going to leave it like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew 2 rows of stitches to secure this in place. I'm also not adding a slider and adjustable bar on this because I know who this is going to, and I've already measured to know exact length that I want this strap to be. It is best when you can add an adjustable strap because that way you could wear this multiple ways. But for this one, I'm not going to. The pattern does explain how to add the adjustable strap, though. If you want to do that, it is broken down easily in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew both of these on and just stitching them in place. Okay, so my strap is finished. I'm just going to clip it on the back, and then this bag is done. I can't believe every time, well, this is only the second time, but both times I've sewn this bag, I'm so surprised at how quick it comes together. And maybe it's just because I love binding, but I think it's just such a cute pattern. I love the contrast. I love how it opens up wide. This is the small, and look at that. That's crazy big. So still plenty of room in here. I have a loose, oh, that one's not even attached. So plenty of room in the small as well. Let's pull both the small and the large side by side. And so we can do a quick comparison of both of these. So here is the large and here is the small. There's also a mini size. I may eventually sew that one up too, but this is a great pattern. Definitely check it out. The pattern link is in the description, and look at her other patterns as well. This fabric, the binding, and the lining are all from J&R Edwards. You can find it there. And if you have any suggestions for any tutorials you want to see, let me know. And I really thank you for watching and for subscribing to my channel. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day sewing.